Nintendo's been its own worst enemy ever since the launch of the Switch 2. They've got the bones of a really impressive device here, but in every aspect of its release, Nintendo has somehow dropped the ball and annoyed fans. In the context of $1,000 plus PC handhelds, rising PlayStation and Xbox prices, the cost isn't even the most controversial point anymore. In today's video, I want to have another look and highlight some of the things I really love about it, but we are going to talk about that anti-consumer behaviour and how it's leading to a lot of disillusionment. Let's start by talking about the digital game cards, which is essentially this code in a box that gives you access to the digital version of a game. You can sort of resell that card later, but in reality, not many collectors are going to want to have this on their shelf. And so for people like me, I've just pretty much decided to download all the games I've bought so far on the Switch store. But that's a real problem with the Switch 2 because this thing comes with 256 gigabytes of internal storage. For a handheld device, this just isn't enough storage, especially if you're the kind of gamer who likes to hop around titles. Combined with the degradation of the physical cartridge, it means you're constantly juggling memory and you can't even get that much resale value from the games you buy. There's already been enough controversy about the price, so you can see why Nintendo would want to keep costs down with a smaller amount of storage. But it seems like they've also skimped out on the battery, because you are really lucky if this thing can last you up to 2 hours. While PC handhelds will give you the option to set the TDP and kind of manage that power profile, there's limited, if any, ability to do that on the Nintendo Switch 2. So even if you're not playing demanding titles, this thing is going to run out of juice really quickly. When you're playing a competitive game online, that low power notification can be terrifying because if you don't find a charger in time, you're going to forfeit the battle, and even then it's going to disrupt your flow. This leads me to something else that I found pretty anti-consumer from Nintendo, and that's the cost of buying additional chargers or docks for the Switch 2. I've always been paranoid about using third-party chargers on Nintendo devices because so many original Switches got bricked by people using the wrong wattage. You will always want to have the charger that comes with the device plugged into the dock. So that means that if you really want to take this on the go, you either have to deal with cable management every time you leave the house, or you have to buy another charger, and they are really quite expensive on the official store. Likewise, if you're constantly moving between households or rooms, you just want to play the Switch in docked mode. Not only are they expensive, there seems to be shortages in supplies, so they're going for between $100 and $150 on eBay. And to make matters worse, Nintendo has nerfed the ability of third-party dock manufacturers to actually make compatible docks with the Nintendo Switch 2. Third-party manufacturers are starting to navigate this, and in other areas like peripherals, there are less expensive options which still feel great to game on. With a lot of tinkering, I managed to connect my Apple Studio display to my Switch 2 so I can game over there. But it's really awkward because the Switch 2 just doesn't support a Thunderbolt out video connection. In this day and age, it feels crazy that Nintendo hasn't just found a way to allow you to play on your TV without the use of a dock, but there we go. While Nintendo has been dropping the ball, some third-party accessory makers have been upping the game. When Dbrand first released this keyboard case, it didn't work as intended because although I didn't have huge issues with it, you couldn't really hold the device by one Joy-Con controller and expect it to stay in. But as you can see now, you can pretty much wobble it quite aggressively and it does fit, and that's because Dbrand actually shipped replacement Joy-Con grips for every single kill switch case that was sold. And that's a huge win on their part. Sometimes they can be a little bit abrasive with their marketing comms, but fair play to them for actually doing a job of replacing all these grips and making it work. They also provided this little sticker here that just sort of stops the USB port from getting scratched as you are docking the device. And so overall, I'm now really happy with this kill switch case and I can absolutely recommend it. There are also now a lot of budget-friendly alternatives to the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, like this EasySMX S10. This one was sent out to me by EasySMX, but I've been really impressed with it so far. In fact, this can do one thing that the OG Pro controller can't do, and that is wake your console with one tap. All you have to do is press the home button and it will wake your Nintendo Switch 2 from its slumber. As you can see, there's some RGB lights integrated here to give you a little bit of flair, and you can even customize this faceplate as well as the D-pad. So you just pop it out like that, and then you can take out this faceplate and swap it with one that is a little clearer, more toned down. It just connects via a magnet, and then you have a more traditional D-pad as well, which you can just slot in. You just need to be careful when you are swapping the faceplates that you get this D-pad orientation right, otherwise it's going to fall at the bottom when you turn the controller over. And also you need to slot in this faceplate into this bottom bit here and then clip it back onto these magnetic connections, otherwise it's not going to be very stable. But the end result is that you get this really nice controller with a more traditional D-pad that feels very clicky and easy to operate. And the faceplate buttons themselves, are a little bit broader than on some of the other Nintendo controllers, which makes them more comfortable to use, I would say. And you also get these mechanical switches underneath those face buttons, which just adds to the auditory experience and helps to make them very consistent. On the rear of the controller, we have these back paddles as well as some operation switches here that can help you pair with other devices, and this does work with many devices beyond just Nintendo. I'll leave a link in my description if you want to check out this controller as well as the D-brand grip. Don't get me wrong, when it comes to the Switch 2 hardware itself, there's a lot to love about this device. It has this beautiful big bright screen, which 10 years on from the Switch, if you've got eyes that have aged as badly as mine have, that makes a big difference. It's also really nice and portable despite having that extra size, and it has some really cool new features. The HD rumble in particular feels just really nice to game on, especially in games like Donkey Kong. But I think that's kind of another issue with the Nintendo Switch 2, is that a lot of those new games, in fact there's only really been 2 that have specifically launched for the Switch 2 so far, that's Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. And they both almost feel like tech demos of new features that they've added to the Switch 2. So for example, Donkey Kong Bonanza, it just puts so much stock in those HD rumble features as you kind of like drill through the ground that I think it almost becomes a bit of a gimmicky game and quite controversial in this view, but at some point it got a bit repetitive and it just felt as if it was relying on those new mechanics a little bit too much rather than, yeah, just keeping me interested in the game itself. And Mario Kart World also got honestly pretty samey after the first few races. There were so many issues that have plagued how they've managed the online community, the way they forced certain game modes on people. But I think ultimately the biggest failure was they just wanted to show off that they could run this open world. I will give Mario Kart World credit where it's due though, because the music on that game is incredible, and that's definitely something you notice playing on the Switch 2. The audio has improved so much compared to the original one. Most of what I've been playing on the Switch 2 has been remakes or remasters of old games. I went through Yakuza 0 and absolutely loved it, but I've picked up the rest of that series on the Steam Deck because it was less expensive to buy Yakuza 1 and 2 Kiwami, which I'll never pronounce properly, in a package. Going back to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it's running so much better than it ever did on the Switch. But, I mean, is that really what we're getting a new console for? Just to kind of get better versions of older games that we almost gave up on because the experience was so bad? Ultimately, I feel like the Switch 2 has ended up in this awkward middle ground. Call it the Switch Pro if you want, but it's essentially a step up from the OG Switch. It will be a big difference to a lot of people, especially if you're only limited to playing on the Nintendo systems. But if you have ventured a little bit further afield, maybe you've got experience with a Steam Deck or a Legion Go or ROG Ally, then you will start to notice its limitations a little bit quicker. The thing is, the argument for any console really, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo Switch 2, is always been that because the company can control the hardware and the software, you end up with a more polished environment to play on. The new PC handhelds, albeit expensive, are actually achieving a similar level of polish at the moment, and it doesn't take too much tinkering to get them up and running well either. So the fact that they have most of the time more options in terms of where to buy your games, how to play them, and are often quite a bit cheaper than what Nintendo are selling their games at, it really does give the Nintendo Switch 2 a problem, which I think is only going to get worse over the next decade. Ultimately, if you love playing Pokemon, Zelda, Mario games, then sure, the Switch 2 is going to be a no-brainer. You're going to pick it up at some stage. And based on the performance of the latest Pokemon game, Pokemon Legends ZA, on the Switch 1, it seems like you might be getting forced to upgrade sooner than you might have hoped. But if you want to play a broader range of titles, you're not too fussed about the Nintendo specific games, then it's actually probably worth waiting. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments and what Nintendo could do to make the Switch 2 a better proposition as we go forward. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in a bit.